But I think there's that middle band, and I don't want to present this some kind of monolithic middle class which is anti-Muslim, but I think there is a middle there is a middle band. At a very elite level, there are people, Hindus and Muslims mix, and a very poor. They do, because they live together, marry each other very often, and certainly very true in Delhi, in slums or resettlement colonies. But in that middle band, I think something has happened over the last 25 years, amongst people that I know, that has led to a real fear of dealing with difference. Because, you know, as we were talking earlier, when there are atrocities against scheduled caste and scheduled tribe people, we rightly object, and people do object.
Very strongly object, yeah.
But I think that's also because we consider at some level people belonging to that background as Hindus, whereas Muslims are often seen as completely different from us. So that they are Hindus and they are somehow.
But that comparison with the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes is very interesting. Let me put that to Dipankar as well and get his views on this. Dipankar Gupta, you know, the Sachar committee report said that Muslims actually rank below scheduled castes and scheduled tribes in terms of development indices. Whereas, you know, as far as scheduled castes and scheduled tribes are concerned, we have the sort of discrimination against SC/ST, atrocities against SC/ST Act. But there is no atrocity against, say, Muslim Act. I mean, it's almost as if religious discrimination is not taken seriously as seriously as caste discrimination. There is no campaign when there are instances of religious discrimination. Religious discrimination legally has not been taken seriously enough. Is that fair or no?
I think you're right. Technically you're right, because I think you're right, because you see, in America there's something called the Fair Housing Act, which was set up in 1968 primarily to protect blacks. You know, like the problem you have with Muslims here, blacks also found it very difficult to find housing in America, and the Fair Housing Act actually kicked in quite effectively, and a large number of blacks benefited quite directly from it. In India, we don't quite have that. You might remember 10 years back, or a little less than 10 years back, the matter went to Supreme Court in India because the Zoroastrian Cooperative Society didn't want people from other communities to be in it. And the Supreme Court said that, you know, the Zoroastrian Cooperative Society is within its rights to disallow members of other communities in its fold, because Article 19(1)(c) allows it, and Article 15 says that the Cooperative Society is not the state. So the Article 15, which says there's no discrimination on religious grounds, doesn't apply to the Zoroastrian community, Cooperative Society, as it does to the state. Now, there are therefore many loopholes in the law which can be, you know, exploited by certain people, which is why I think drawing from Sachar Committee's findings, which are not surprising anyway, most of us knew what those facts were, but now that they've been put on the table, in, you know, very, very ostensibly, we can't duck the issue any longer. We must have a law of some kind. Equal Opportunities Act, Mr. Madhav Menon was involved in it, and he's a very distinguished person, and he had made some suggestions on this count. We must have a law to take into account this kind of discrimination, and it just happened in other places in the world too. They also had to have laws to really fight this discrimination, because discrimination.
But Dipankar Gupta, would that not come up against, you know, minority rights? Because, you know, as you rightly pointed out, what if a Muslim community stops a Muslim building stops a Hindu from getting a flat in that community? Then it would be the Muslim minority rights. You know, then it would be protection of minorities.
Yes, but in the Madhav Menon committee report, it cut both ways. They were against this kind of discrimination on both sides, and I think that is very important, because if you have to have a law, it has to be even-handed.
Right.
You can't say this works for Muslims and not for Hindus, and so on and so forth. When it comes to scheduled castes, the matter is a little complicated, because, you know, you must remember that a scheduled caste is not easily distinguishable from his or her name. It's very difficult to tell. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't, and therefore, you know, when if you tell somebody this is your name, and unless they ask the question, they'll never know. And very often, scheduled caste people, they put forward their caste the way they believe it to be. So, you know, it's not quite easily, people can't quite easily figure out the caste of a person. But you're absolutely correct. There are laws against atrocities, laws which prohibit atrocity against scheduled caste, and as you know,